The lens was not reflecting the storm. It was pulling the sky into itself. Elias Thorne's radio screamed with a sound like stone being dragged across the bottom of the ocean. The lantern room shook around him, every pane of glass turning black from the outside in. Above the tower, something massive pressed down through the fog. "It's not glass!" Elias shouted into the recorder, his voice cracking. "The lens is bone! It's not shining! It's feeding!" Then, the light turned negative white. For 1 second, the ocean vanished. For 1 second, the stars were underneath him. And then, the radio played his own voice back from the beginning. "Survey 1 to base. I've made landfall." The GPS didn't fail. It inverted. One moment, my skiff was cutting through the dark Atlantic, 30 miles off the North Carolina coast. The next, every coordinate on the screen snapped to 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. The engine died with a cough. The compass spun so fast, the needle blurred. Then, the hull struck something solid beneath the waves, and I was thrown forward against the console as the boat slid up onto a bank of fine gray sand that had not existed on any chart I had ever seen. I am Elias Thorne. For 20 years, I mapped ghost shoals in the graveyard of the Atlantic, sandbanks that appeared after storms, shifted without warning, and swallowed careless boats whole. I knew this coast better than some men know their own streets. But this was not a shoal. The sand around the boat was too smooth, too pale, too cold. It gave off a faint powdery mist when I stepped onto it, as if the island had been ground down from something older than stone. Ahead of me, rising from the fog, stood a lighthouse. It should not have been there. The tower was enormous, a tapering spire of salt-crusted stone, but its shape was wrong. Too sharp, too clean, too modern in its angles. It looked like an 1800s lighthouse, rebuilt by someone who had only heard one described in a nightmare. And at the top, behind the lantern glass, a black light turned slowly. Not darkness, light. Black light. It moved across the fog like a beam made of absence. I whispered to my radio. "Survey 1 to base," I whispered. "I've made landfall. There's a structure at the 0 point. It's a lighthouse, but the light, it's black." The radio did not answer with static. It answered with a voice. Thin, wet, far away. "Thorne, is that you?" I froze. The voice came again, clearer now. "We've been waiting 40 years for the surveyor." My mouth went dry. "Identify yourself." A pulse of interference passed through the radio. Beneath it, I heard something else. A low, rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat recorded through deep water. Then, the timestamp on my digital recorder began to roll backward. 2026, 2010, 1994, 1984. I ripped the recorder from my vest and stared at it. The numbers kept falling. 1971, 1942, 1884. Then they stopped. A new file appeared on the screen. Recovered audio. E. Thorne. Final entry. I had never recorded it. The lighthouse door was already open. That was the first thing that made me want to turn back. Not the impossible island, not the dead instruments, not the voice on the radio. The door. It stood ajar in the base of the tower, black iron pulled inward just wide enough for one man to enter. With a bad feeling, as if someone inside had been expecting me and had grown tired of waiting. The sand shifted under my boots. For a second, I thought the island was sinking. Then I realized the movement came from beneath the ground. With rhythmic emphasis, thump, thump, thump. The sound traveled up through my legs. Not waves, not machinery. A heartbeat. I should have run back to the boat, I know that now. But men like me build their lives around the belief that every impossible thing is only unexplained until someone steps closer. So I stepped closer. Inside, the air smelled of ozone, wet rope, and ancient kelp left too long in a sealed room. My flashlight beam cut across stone walls, sweating with condensation. The interior should have been rotten, broken, abandoned. It was not. A mahogany desk sat in the entry chamber, polished and clean. On it stood a steaming cup of coffee. The steam rose in one perfect, unmoving ribbon. Beside the cup lay an orange flight recorder, scorched black on one side, its casing dented as if it had fallen from a great height. I recognized the model instantly. Commercial aircraft black box. Modern. Impossible. The label had been scratched away. In its place, someone had carved one word into the metal. Spectrum. The floor thudded again beneath me. Thump. This time, the coffee rippled. I picked up the flight recorder. It was too heavy. Not heavy like metal. Heavy like it was full of pressure. There was one manual playback switch. I pressed it. No cockpit alarm came out. No engine noise. Only breathing. A man's breathing. Then a telegraph key began clicking with slow, deliberate precision. Spectrum. The same word. With sudden urgency, my radio cracked. Elias? It was Sarah, my base commander. Her voice was faint, but real. Sarah, do you see my signal? A long pause. Then, your boat is still offshore. I looked back through the open door. The fog outside had thickened. I could barely see the sand. What do you mean?
Can you hear me?
Your boat is 30 miles out, empty, drifting in daylight. With rising horror, I turned slowly. The door behind me was no longer open to the beach. It opened to bright blue sky and rolling ocean. My skiff floated far away in sunlight, but I was still inside the lighthouse at night. The doorway flickered. Fog returned. Sarah's voice dropped. Elias, where are you? Before I could answer, another voice bled through the radio beneath hers. It was also Sarah, younger, crying. Don't let him climb. Then a third Sarah, older, whispered. The lens remembers listeners. The signal died. The stairwell began directly behind the desk, spiraling upward into blackness. There was no dust on the steps, no footprints, no salt crust. The place looked maintained, but not by hands. I climbed. After 10 steps, the stone wall flickered. For half a second, it became smooth black carbon fiber, cold and seamless, like the interior of a machine not yet invented. Then, it snapped back to moss-streaked granite. After 20 steps, my ears popped so hard I nearly dropped the recorder. With absolute astonishment, after 30, I heard the ocean beneath me. Not outside, beneath. I looked down through the central shaft of the staircase. There was no entry chamber below, no desk, no floor, only clouds. A whole storm system rotated under my feet, miles below, lit from within by silent lightning. The staircase was hanging in the sky. I gripped the rail and forced myself not to look again. On the first landing, I found a logbook nailed open to a wooden stand. The pages were yellowed, swollen with damp. The ink was fresh. The last dated entry read, October 14, 1884. The keeper has arrived from the future. He carries an orange box that speaks in the voices of the dead. He says the light must stay dark, or the great weight will fall from the stars. Below it, in handwriting I knew better than my own face, someone had added, I shouldn't have opened the door. My knees weakened. The radio clicked once. Then my own voice came through it. Not live, recorded. Calm. Too calm. Entry 2. If I hear this again, I have already failed once. With rising fear, I backed away from the logbook. The tower answered with a slow metallic groan. Somewhere above me, the lens began to move, with the sound of something mechanical and organic. At first, it was a faint grinding sound, like gears waking after a century underwater. Then the sound changed. Teeth. That was the only word for it. Teeth gnashing in a mouth too large to imagine. The black beam swept past a narrow window on the landing. The moment it touched me, every hair on my arms rose. My flashlight died. The flight recorder in my hand warmed. A screen on its side flickered to life, though I had never seen one on that model. It showed a video feed. The lantern room. A man stood there with his back to the camera. Me. I was watching myself from above, but I was still on the landing. On the screen, the other Elias raised one hand and placed it against the lens. Behind him, something tall unfolded from the ceiling. The video cut to black. A single line appeared. Do not let the light find the shape of you. Then the screen went dead. I ran. Not down. There was no down anymore. The stairs below had folded into the dark, each step bending into impossible angles, leading back to itself. The only path left was up, so I climbed toward the thing that was waiting. Every few steps, the lighthouse changed around me. Stone became rusted steel. Steel became white ceramic. Ceramic became damp wood filled with the smell of whale oil and old storms. I passed doors that should not have existed. With unease, one opened onto a hospital corridor with seawater flowing ankle-deep over the tiles. Another showed a ship's bridge, empty except for a captain's hat spinning slowly on the floor. With melancholy, another revealed my childhood bedroom, dark except for the glow of a black lighthouse turning on the wall. From inside that room, a child's voice whispered, "Don't look at the window." With physical effort, I kept climbing. By the time I reached the lantern room, blood pounded in my ears so hard it drowned out the tower. With astonishment, the chamber was vast, too vast for the size of the lighthouse. The glass walls curved outward into fog, but beyond the fog, there was no ocean anymore. There was a black mirror void where the sea should have been, reflecting a sky full of stars moving too fast, all of them spiraling toward a single unseen point. At the center stood the great lens. It was not glass. The facets were translucent, polished, and yellow-white. Bone. Hundreds of ribs, finger bones, and curved plates shaped into a perfect optical machine. Not human bone. Not animal bone. Something denser, older. The pieces flexed as the lens turned, opening and closing with the slow precision of an eye. In the corner of the room sat a man hunched over a 1980s cassette recorder. He wore my jacket, my watch, my boots. He looked up. His face would not stay still. For 1 second, he was young, then old, then skeletal, then me. "The lighthouse isn't here to guide ships," he said. His voice was a chorus of different ages, all exhausted. "Lighthouses are for things that are lost." I lifted the flight recorder like a weapon. "What is this place?" A hook. The lens clicked behind me. The room darkened. The man pointed upward. And something very large, from very far away, has been looking for the line. The roof groaned. Dust fell from the stones. No, not dust. Sand. Gray sand. The island was inside the tower now, falling upward. I stepped back. The man held out a Polaroid photograph. It was still developing. I did not take it, but the image formed anyway. It showed me from behind, standing before the bone lens in that exact moment. And behind me, descending from the ceiling, was a shadow too tall for the room. Thin arms, long fingers, a head like an eclipse. I turned. Nothing was there. The man smiled sadly. It only appears after you know where to look. Sarah's voice, in total panic.
Elias, listen to me. The sandbank is shrinking. Whatever signal you're on, it's pulling weather into the coordinates. We're seeing a pressure drop across 3 states. Sarah, send help. Sarah's voice, crying. We did. Her voice broke. 40 years ago. Tense silence. The lens stopped rotating. The silence that followed was worse than the grinding. The entire tower held its breath. Heavy impact. Then a sound came from above. One slow impact. Boom. With extreme fear, the roof bowed inward. The man in my jacket closed his eyes. The great weight, he whispered. The logbook had been right. It was not a metaphor. With urgency, another impact. Boom. The stone cracked, but no pieces fell. The cracks filled with black light. The flight recorder began clicking again, faster now. The telegraph rhythm accelerated until it became a scream. With tragic realization, I understood then. It had never been a recorder. It was a sensor. A lure.
Every voice it played, every timestamp it broke, every signal it caught, it was baiting something through the lighthouse, teaching it where we were, and I had carried it to the lens. Shouting into the radio, I grabbed my radio. If anyone hears this, I said, barely able to breathe, do not search the 0 coordinates. Do not trust a chart that corrects itself. Do not follow a black light. Describing the end. The roof peeled open like wet paper. There was no monster above me. There was an eye. Not an eye with flesh or lids, but a storm-shaped absence so vast that my mind could only translate it as hunger. Stars moved inside it. Whole weather systems bent around it. The lighthouse beam rose into it like a fishing line pulled tight. With resignation, the bone lens opened. I saw my skiff 30 miles away under the 2026 sun. I saw Sarah in a control room, listening to my signal before I had sent it. I saw the 1884 keeper writing my name in a book.
I saw myself as a child, staring at the horizon, already being remembered by the lighthouse. Then the black light found my face. The man in my jacket pressed record on the cassette player. The lantern room filled with negative white. For one beautiful, impossible second, I saw the color of a dying star. Then the tape clicked. End of side. Silence. A moment later, the radio on the mahogany desk in the entry chamber came alive. My own voice began again. Survey 1 to base. I've made landfall. There's a structure at the 0 point. Outside, the sandbank shifted beneath the fog. The lighthouse that isn't there turned its black light across the sea and waited for the next surveyor to find the gap in the map. Check your coordinates. Some places are missing because something removed them. Word count, 1798.